So I just decided to, come in with this video and try to help you guys in your preparations and things like that so that everything you do from now on is effective. I won't lie. This is something I would do for, people that are paying because it has the sauce and everything. But, I just decided, um, let me just, try to help out here. So in this session, I'll just help you guys with, doing questions as the topic stipulates here. So let's dive in, right? First things first, like I'm sure you guys might have been confused, how do you start? Um, do you begin with the scenario or with the required? Sure, there's some preference here, right? Like it's up to you. Some people do well even if they start with the scenario. Some do well even if they start with the required or whatever, right? So I would say if you're a person who doesn't struggle with time and who doesn't struggle with, um, understanding the scenario. Usually, if you are struggling with understanding the scenario, it's probably because you're looking at everything all at once, right? As opposed to um, having some direction, which is where the required comes in, right? The order I used and I would recommend, right? Of course, whatever works for you, but starting with the required is amazing, right? Because number one, you know where to look. You know, okay, this is a CPC question. I should look at, okay, actions, right? What is someone doing? I should look at that specific question. You'll see in the example I have later, right? So the required really helps you have a laser focused eye, essentially, right? And also, it helps you decide where are you starting. And this could be, are you strong with, okay, sure, this is auditing and all questions are discussion, but essentially for other modules also, like it's like, if you are strong at discussions or you're strong at calculations, right? So looking at all of those requires already, okay, this is a calculate, this is a discuss. Um, I'm probably going to start here because I'm gonna get more confidence here and I write faster here. So that's where, you are ranking, right? You just sure there's a required which is A, B, C, D, but on the side you just say, okay, this is 1, 2, 3 for me, 4 for me, right? Then it doesn't have to be in the same order. Um, this prepares your brain to finish the paper. Remember, this is a very big thing. Finishing the paper is important. So psychologically, your brain thinks, okay, we are going to finish this paper, right? And then specific sections. So this is, if a required says refer to section 1 or section 2 or background, right? Something you need to look out for and highlight there because it's important. It's just going to help you out, right? As in when you dive in. And then some requires are not really specific. So that one, as and when you are starting to read, like don't pay too much attention to it because it's just going to confuse, right? And by the way, here, all you are doing is you are not, so you get your whole question. Your question has 5 requires, right? All you are doing is scanning through to get a sense of, okay, where am I starting? What topic is possibly here, is this a calculate, is this a discuss and everything? And you get a sense of, okay, this is how many questions we have and everything like that. Sure, you might not know the ranking in full, right? But some questions you can see, this is clearly a ROM question. This is clearly a CPC question. It's clearly this and this and this, right? Um, and then, yeah, you just decide based on what you know in terms of based on the topics you are strong at, right? The scenario might make it difficult, but yeah, that's also something you can adjust later, right? And then after you've schemed through the required, you'd go to your background, right? Background is it tells us basically, where we are starting from or our baseline in a sense. It's a very important thing. Like, dealing with a company that sells alcohol and dealing with a company that sells baby products, these are two separate things. Like whether the company sells services or sells goods, also two different things. So frame of thinking is very important because as you know, auditing needs your ManFin knowledge. It also needs your FinEc knowledge. So you need to be able to have an understanding of the standards that could be applicable of the type of thinking you should use there. But yeah, right. I guess the background because it doesn't apply to a specific question most of the time, even though it might. Just read it to understand and get your story, right? And then now um, you would go into the scenario sections, right? Remember, you know your requires. Usually here you would be trying to attempt the required in a way, but just before everything, right, you would go into the scenario sections now. Like you basically dive deeper into the section. And another requirement, like or another suggestion, you guys should make sure you take out your required. Like this is something I've always done. Rip out your required out of the question, put it next to you so that you know, as and when you're reading the relevant section, or you know, whatever required you're reading, and it says refer to section one, maybe for example, make sure that you have these two things like this so that you are not missing things, right? Because sometimes you read the required wrong and you then interpret the scenario wrong, right? So try as hard as you can to, you know, keep it close with you so that you see, oh, okay, this is what I should look at. This is what I should look at um, while diving into the sections, right? And then your talking points, right? This is now you're getting closer to writing. Like you'll be looking at, you know, what issues am I seeing here? This person seems to be recording hours incorrectly, for example, or this person is lying about this specific thing, right? But you just take the broad picture. Usually it's a summary of one paragraph, and these are usually going to be your headings most of the time, right? So anyone who's confused about how do I even make headings, or maybe sometimes you see scenarios and you confused how they came up with those headings. It's usually, you know, that one thing that like is different, or think of it as the main story of one specific paragraph in a way, right? Like if I'm dealing with a meeting and someone was saying this thing in a meeting, and then in another session I'm dealing with where someone was outside and they were selling things for the client, maybe for example. These are two separate things, right? So it just summarize the why is this thing zooming in? Just summarize the okay, you know what, it's fine. Just summarize the story basically, right? The story of that specific paragraph, and that gives you your heading. Like it doesn't have to be fancy, like as long as the marker can see, oh, okay, you're speaking about this, right? And then um the structure planning, basically how you're going to structure the thing. Like in auditing it's not as important, but um I would say, you know, even in terms of the pages, like a simple thing as having your answer book and writing, I'm going to write required A in this paper. I'm going to write required B in this paper. I'm going to write required C in that paper. Like you might not think it's an important thing, but trust me, it conditions your brain to think that, you know, if I'm struggling on this question, there's still a required B here. You know, might as well just move or something like it conditions your brain to finish. Like one thing that, you know, I live by is aim to finish, right? But yeah, that's just the order, I guess. Look at your required, skim through it, um, read the background, right? And then um, go back to the required, right? Go back to the required. Now you're probably answering, right? Go back to the required. Read the section with the required, right? Read the specific section or the applicable section with the required next to you. Save yourself time, right? And then um, before you even write, you know, think of your talking points, think of what main issues are here, and then yeah, structure and plan the whole thing. Considering that okay, I'm going to finish this thing, right? That's the order and game plan, right? And then if we go to the analysis of it now, right? This can make or break you, especially in auditing, right? Like um, you know, I was telling my students today that auditing, I know people, and I don't know why, but you know, people overlook the knowledge you must have, you know, in order to be able to see things in auditing. Like, um, just reading the textbook is my favorite thing, but you can't identify something you don't know, guys. This is obvious, of course, but sure, practicing helps, but it only helps because it also shows you things that you didn't know, and it also, you know, I guess you practice that skill of writing. But knowledge is everything, right? Knowledge is everything, and I guess you still need the skill to write the thing appropriately, of course, and that's where you learn the practice. But at the end of the day, if you don't know what JSE triggers, you're not going to get a point. So you see my point. So um, again, polish your understanding and everything. But as when it comes to analysis, this is also up to you. Whether you're a highlighter, whether you're a person who underlines, this is up to you. Um, depending how you do things. But one I would recommend is this one, the keywords, right? So keywords is so let's say you're reading a sentence and they are speaking about the JSE. I like using the JSE because it's a very common thing. Speaking about the JSE, on top of that word, just making an arrow. Most of you, probably many people do this, right? Just making an arrow and writing that, okay, public interest entities, maybe writing pi to keep it short. Make sure that it's short so that, we move on. Maybe pi. And then, because when you come back here, my brain is going to be triggered, right? My brain is going to be triggered and I'm going to write easier, right? So, and you'll see that, after you've done your analysis, technically you should know if you pass the paper or not. If you think about it, like technically you should know because you have identified the key things that apply in each and every sentence, right? Each and every keyword that you've seen and everything. You've written, okay, here I'm gonna apply companies like maybe there's an integration of CPC as well. Maybe there's a raw, maybe there's this. So you've written all of these things all over your scenario, and technically you have answered the thing. All you need is to just write it down, right? So you will know. But this is not to say when after you're analyzing, you realize you don't have any points, you should give up. Sometimes the question is hard, or maybe sometimes, they need you to fight and use your brain. But, most of the time, you know where the question is leading you, essentially. And you're going to think later when you write, of course. Um, and another thing that's very important, why this keywords thing is important is because when you read a section, like let's say you're reading section 1, when you read that section, you shouldn't read one set like the first sentence and then try to write. And we do this a lot when it comes to CPC questions most of the time. In ROM, I guess in ROM it's fine because ROM, like usually one sentence in the scenario gives you like a risk or whatever. But some questions like CPC, they need you to read the whole thing first and then you go and write because you need the structure, CPC points all over that section. Like they'll talk about the the maybe let's say the auditor is under investigation, and then at the end they will speak about the outcome of this investigation, right? So if you rushed there at the top and you started answering things or you started answering uh this guy is doing this, but at the end maybe that thing contradicts whatever you have there or there was no conclusion and whatever, you'll end up rewriting things most of the time and you'll end up having to conclude again, instead of grouping things in terms of the similarities or are they speaking about the same thing, putting them under one heading and then answering just like that. So headings are not just something markers want to see, but they really help you structure your answer either way, right? So uh find smart ways to help when writing, e.g. AC, you know the required by now, right? So as and when you analyze, remember you would have seen the required, right, of that specific session. And so you would know that, okay, I know this question is about acceptance and continuance, or I know it's about ROM, right? You see what a risk is, right? Or you see what a key control is. Let's say you have to do tests of controls or whatever. You can see, okay, this is a key control. You can write K, right? Basically, the smart way is basically you just reminding yourself that, okay, this is a key control, this is a key control, this is a key control. And the marks are 14 marks. So in your head, you're thinking, I need to identify 14 Ks here, right? So essentially, you are answering the required before you even answer it, which it helps you when you start to write and you become very fast, right? Like you become, fast as and when you start writing. Um, but yeah, with ANC, with acceptance and continuance, because acceptance and continuance, you have to split between the client considerations and the auditor consideration, right? So in your head, you'll be thinking, okay, this is an auditor consideration, maybe about resources, and then this one is a client consideration about their integrity. Whatever the case is, but whatever works for you, right? This is really Um, it depends on you as a person, right? And also put any extra thoughts that come, right? Since everything in auditing is connected. This one is a big one. Like if you see something in the scenario and you realize that, but this thing is speaking about a loan, okay? Maybe Companies Act could apply here. And then you start thinking to yourself, okay, if a requirement speaks about CPC though, how can I translate this thing to Companies Act? You see, so if they had, maybe the company took out a loan without doing all the things required per the Companies Act, and there's someone who is a CA, right? Remember, you must meet the requirements of the specific standard because CPC wants CAs and I think audit firms or whatever, right? It needs professional accountants, essentially. So you must make sure you're within the vicinity of the standard and the code or whatever, and you are turning that thing into that thing because a breach of Companies Act, as you guys know, is a breach of professional behavior. So anything in auditing, really, if I'm being honest, is interconnected. Like whether it's your ISAs, right? Whether it's your ISAs, breaching an ISA is breaching, is not following standards. So it's professional competence, right? Or, the APA, if an auditor doesn't report that thing, something they were supposed to report, they've breached the APA. You see, so everything is really connected. So um, whenever something comes to your head that you've seen before, it's okay to just put it down there with the question mark to show yourself that, okay, this is a consideration, right? But yeah, and then view the scenario as one, unless scoped, follow people's names and behaviors, e.g. the CEO. Yeah, this is also a big one, like, sure, some questions may have like, may scope you into one specific section, like they say, referring only here, right? But the thing is, you can always come up with a point if, let's say, they've been speaking about one specific person throughout the whole question, and this person has been doing things, right? You can take that forward and say, okay, this guy has been doing this before. So what does that mean now in this specific required, right? So let's say I'm doing a ROM question and I've seen this guy has been doing unethical things before and he's the CEO, right? It's going to affect me because, what does that mean about, the control environment or corporate governance and all of those things. So you see, it's like, it's a nice to know, but usually, your sections are all encompassing anyway. They just say, okay, focus only on this section. But yeah, I guess it's good to always think about everything as one. And then this is your analysis here. I hope I didn't miss anything. Yeah. And then now we move to the actual writing, right? So with the actual writing, like I was saying, you should already know if you pass before you even start writing. And I mean, passing is like, I'm only saying this because there's more than enough there's more than enough marks in a question to give you a pass or at least close to a pass. Unless your lecturers are mad at you guys were disrespectful or whatever, they might take out like a crazy paper. But most of the time, right, there's more than enough, there's more than enough points in each scenario to pass a question, right? So by then, I mean, this is just a personal thing because you know what you know. Okay, Companies Act came out, I know this. CPC came out, I know this. There's an ISA that came out, which I know. There's this that came out, which I know. So you have that idea. So relax. It's very important because once you start writing, you need to relax, right? And then we dive deeper, right? So you say lay out in your head first and then write. So when I say lay out in your head, this was more about the structure, right? Like at least know where you're gonna write. You can write it down if you're a person who forgets things. Like if you think if the things you were thinking during the scenario, when you start writing, you seem to forget them, then I guess it will help you to write it down. But make sure you practice this, right? Everything here, guys, if you're going to apply it, practice it first. I wouldn't don't try it in the exam first, right? Um, and then, yeah, just lay it out in your head. How am I going to structure this? Like, am I going to start with, okay, stating general points, right? Stating, okay, this person is a CA, therefore parts one on I was going to apply. Okay, that's going to be my first point, okay? And then I'm going to dive into this issue and then speak about the threat. and explain why that thing is a threat and the fundamental principle it affects and all of that stuff. Just a quick layup, and then um, put the main issues as headings, right? The reason why we use main issues is because this is what your examiners want to see mostly, right? And if they see, number one, if they see them as headings, they will be happy at you because you're like, you saw what we wanted you to see, number one, right? And so picking your main issues as the headings is good and it directs you, right? It also helps you break down the scenario. Let's say it's a 20 marks question. You identified 4 issues. You know I'm gonna have okay, 5, 5, 5, 5 here. Sometimes other issues have more, but you know, at least I have like, plus minus 5 in each thing, right? And then yeah, like I say here, break down by marks and the issues, right? So every required can be broken down by the issues it has and the marks it has, right? And then aim to write efficient sentences. Don't start writing until you've thought the whole sentence. This one is a big one. Like even Psycho always says that, students would do well by first thinking and then writing. Don't write while you're thinking. Like the reason why you keep writing long sentences or you keep scratching and you keep doing this and this is because you rushed to start writing, but that makes you take longer than it would have taken if you first thought, okay, I want to say, this guy is contravening King for because he is both the CEO and the chairman. That's what I want to write, right? So don't just start writing by saying, um, I don't know, by starting with something that's quoted in the in the scenario. Like for example, you say, Jerry, maybe let's say it's Jerry. Jerry is the chief financial officer of this company and he is also the chairman. And then that's you just quoting whatever you see there. And then you go and you apply the thing, right? Most of the time you'd find that your sentence construction doesn't make sense as and when you're going into it, right? So try in your head to first think that, okay, first of all, another tip that I'm going to give you guys, right? Um, the scenario, the markers do not want to see you quoting a scenario as it is. Like you can just summarize whatever you see in a scenario into into however it makes sense in your head. Because like the marker can see the scenario because they also have it, right? You should not re regurgitate whatever has already been said there. You're wasting yourself time, you're wasting ink, you're wasting space or whatever the case is. But like just summarize it and say, Jerry is both CEO and chairman. Like instead of writing exactly what they have there word for word. That's another thing you need to realize, right? It's gonna save your time if you're a person who does that. But you know, think about the whole sentence and then put it down. Right? Think about okay, this is happening. Why is that happening? And or this is happening. This means this, and why does it mean that? Right? Or whatever the case is. But like, just try to have the whole sentence in your head and then write it down. And then skip lines and write neatly. Right? I always say like your markers do not have the time to follow whatever you were trying to say. Besides that, like you are frustrating them. They've been marking your paper is probably the 90th one or the 100th one they're marking, and they're marking at night or whatever, right? So just to avoid, sure, like I always say, go and remark afterwards. Always go and remark, but it's gonna be depressing if you get a bad mark, and it's simply because you were writing badly, right? So try to keep things neat, skip lines after every sentence. Papers are limitless. They will give you paper if you finish, right? And then break down everything, create mini requires, right? So this is it also, I guess it's also attached to this point here. But qualifier words, like if they tell you that, speak about King 4 and the Companies Act, these are already two requires in one. This like it's a 10 mark, but not really. It's like a 5 mark, 5 mark, which is less stressful if you think about it, right? And even then you can still break it further because there's two issues maybe inside Companies Act. Maybe there was a loan and there was a Companies Act. Yo, I forgot. But yeah, maybe there was a loan or there was something else inside of the Companies Act. So you have two issues to look at. Same thing with King 4. There was, the committee, how it's structured, and then there's also, the chairman doing whatever, right? So already you have, oh, okay, now my required looks like it's a 2 mark question instead of, a 4 mark question or whatever the case is, right? So just try to break it down here and then plan for the next questions, right? Uh, plan for next questions, conditions your brain to finish. Oh yeah. So this is what I was saying about, just simply writing required A, B, C, D, or this I'm gonna start with required C and D and whatever the case is, right? And as you guys know, you don't have to start with required A. Do whatever suits you. Like, point is to build confidence at the start, right? So always start wherever you are comfortable. And of course, aim to finish, right? And then yeah, this might be big for you, or it's something you might already know, right? But free your mind, right? This is something that helped me a lot, right? Free your mind. Your answer is right as long as you have, number one, you have an existing principle. Whatever you're saying there is a principle that exists, right? Like, make sure that you understand the principle, right? Because if you apply it there, it actually needs to apply. Number two, you are answering the required. If the required is asking you to, state a wrong, you're actually speaking about a wrong, right? And number three, your sentence is full. Like, you're explaining the whys in there, like why you saying that, right? And it doesn't matter what let's say because I know with auditing, right? Sometimes you might read the solutions to your practice questions and you realize um I didn't think this point this way or whatever the case is, right? But if you realize that the points that they have there are points and most of the time the principles in there them. That's the thing. That's always the thing. Like, you always know the principle. So maybe when you were analyzing, you just didn't think of an existing principle like here, and you didn't answer the required, or you didn't, state the whys. So most of the time people mess up here in answering the required and in also stating the whys, right? Existing principle, I mean, we all know the principles, like, or like, you can't create a principle. Like, you can't create a fake principle. So most of the time, the principle we apply is an actual principle, right? But just free your mind. This relaxes you because once you see this, you are able to, go into an exam and just fight for yourself and say, okay, whatever I see there, as long as I apply a principle that I know and it actually applies there and I'm answering the required and, my sentence has the why, you should definitely get your mark, right? So, yeah. And then the big one, right? Big one is the marking. This is really where, of course, you can't do this in an exam. So hopefully you guys um will be practicing because you can't apply this if you're not practicing, right? But this is really where the learning actually happens. And here I say marking, and then I scratch it out and I say it's actually learning, right? So the thing is when you do a question, I think most of us have the mentality of testing ourselves. Like, and that's fine, right? That's fine. But like, you guys have been taking tests for most of your life. It's fair to say, like, you kind of know what you kind of like understand the game of being tested or whatever the case is. But like, I would say, because when you apply it, when you attack this as a matter of testing yourself, you then get attached to your answers, or you get attached to being wrong or right, right? You see that, oh, I got 3 marks here, okay, I got this wrong, okay, I got this right, and then you try to cram whatever you got wrong, right? Or whatever the case is. But like, the point is, try as hard as you can to forget. Like, after writing whatever you wrote, me, this is what I do, right? I don't know about everyone else, but like, after writing and finishing whatever I was doing, I forget that. And when I look at the scenario, when I look at the solution, I look at it to learn and absorb the most out of it. Whether it's an answer I got right, because the thing is, when you're so focused on getting things right, you get a thing right and then you skip it, but you don't realize why you got it right, right? So it's very important that even the answers that you get right, understand why you got it right. Like, oh, sure, of course, because you got it right, you kind of know. And I mean, not word for word, but like you see, okay, I got this right. But, also look at, how they wrote it there. Did they use the same reasoning you used? Did they use the same section you used? Did they write it as short or as long as you did? Right. And I know, and like I say here, marking should take time because this is where really you learn, the most, right? It's very important. It's a very important part of the process. And trust me, you can do two questions and pass a paper. And I'm saying this from experience because me, I wasn't like a person who does too many questions. But when I do a question, I made sure, right? And imagine then if you did more questions, right? How powerful you would be. But yeah, so this is really where you learn, right? And then pay attention to, where the solution starts and why. Each of your general points. I always say, your general points are not there just for fun, guys. Like they're not general because they're general or they are like bread and butter answers. But like it's always an important thing. Like when they say this guy is a CA, therefore parts this will apply. It's because you have to be a CA for CPC to apply to you, right? Even in the ISAs, like those general points where you cross cast and you cast and everything, those points are important because in auditing, before you audit something, you must make sure it's complete. Because if I'm going to refer to things that I didn't test that, make sense mathematically and everything, it does not make sense for me to go further and test more, right? So just understanding why the general points are there also helps you because you'll never forget them if you understand why they are there, right? Pay attention to the conclusions as well, right? How are they? Okay, this is usually, normally obvious, like the conclusion follows the structure of the discussion and everything, right? And then sentence length, like I was saying, right? Would you have written it the same way? Just looking at the length of the sentence in the solution, does it look like yours? Like even if you got the answer right, but like it's just too long. Because trust me, that 2 seconds, 3 seconds longer that you took could have saved you, could have been allocated to another question. So yeah, look at the sentence length as well. And then keywords, right? These are usually in bold. Okay, depending on your university, but SAICA does this as well. Um, the keywords there, it's usually the words that the standards use, like, you know, let's say for integrity, right? Being straightforward and honest is usually a bold word in the solutions, right? The markers really want to see this, like, and the more you adopt the words that they use in the scenario, the easier you are to, in a way, trick the marker into thinking you wrote the right answer. Trust me, like I've seen it before, right? You can trick a marker into thinking you wrote the right answer by just using keywords, right? Even if your point maybe at the end is not full or whatever, but like you might get lucky and things like that. So definitely helps, yeah. And then the order of the solution, right? How are they starting things? Um, are they starting with assessing wrong and then actually testing it? Or with auditing, I mean, the order is never that important. But of course, general points must start, right? And then everything else comes after. Or, you must obtain a sample first before you test it. You can't test before getting a sample. You see those type of things. They seem obvious, but they're also something to be considered, right? And then what points should be grouped together, right? This one is also important. Like, I guess this is more of like a trigger grouping thing. And I was saying that, it might help to make mind maps. Like, a new audit, right? You know that in a new audit, the ROMs that are common there is that opening balances might be misstated because, these guys know that you guys are new. So they have the opportunity, right, to change things. Also, accounting policies might not be applied consistently year on year because these guys are aware you guys are new. So there's that ROM, right? So these two things, you might see them in one solution. And, you knowing that, okay, whenever I see your audit, I know there's an opening balance implication, there's an accounting policy implication. And don't try to memorize the whole sentence, but like just know the keywords, right? Just know the keywords that are important there. Um, and this is not cramming, this is understanding, right? And making associations. And then why they put the answer required plus scenario trigger. If it doesn't make sense, consult. This one is probably, oh, what am I doing? This one is probably the biggest thing here, why they put the answer, right? And I personally believe that every answer in your required has a reason why it's there, right? You should always go back to the scenario and find out why, what made them say this, right? Because trust me, there is a reason. Sure, some things are bread and butter, like opening palace. There might not even be anything in the solution, and it's like it's you just know them, right? But the standard maybe might help you in those instances where something is like bread and butter and it's always that way. But um, just just always try to find why this point is there in this scenario. Because trust me, later when you come to an exam, you'll be able to make those same associations, right? Your brain would instinctively remember that, okay, the other time, they mentioned um JSE, and they somehow made a connection to, public interest entity, and how, these guys need to apply King 4 or need to have key audit matters in their report. You see, that type of thing, it's always like a connection thing, and you learn. And again, remember, like I say here, you should take notes of these connections. Yeah, just the principle, not don't take the whole sentence in there, but like just the principle, right? And then if it doesn't make sense, consult. If it doesn't make sense why they're saying those things, you either have a knowledge gap, like I'm saying, read up on that thing and make sure you understand. But if it just doesn't make sense, based on your knowledge, consult. Right? Ask someone for help. And then, do you have a knowledge gap? Like a knowledge gap, like I say here, if too many answers don't make sense in the solution, textbook and consult. That's the best way to see if you have a knowledge gap. Like you've read 4 points already and you have no idea how they got there. Sure, it's possible that you didn't even like you were not reading the scenario well. But I honestly think if you know your stuff, the scenario will make sense to you when you know your stuff. Like it always makes sense in a way, right? So yeah, it's an indicator of a knowledge gap, yeah, knowledge gap. And then marking should take time, like I say, right? This is where we learn. Um, and then take notes at the end, right? This is a new principle you learned, and make sure that it's flexible. When I say flexible, I mean, JSE, you just say JSE, arrow. I know, okay, this is linked to this type of thing or this type of thinking, right? And then maybe companies act implication wherever possible. Like just um group the principle that you learned there, right? Group the principle that you learned there. And maybe, even it could be a thing of like an order. Like whenever I start, I make sure I should sample first, right? Because what am I because remember, guys, auditing, you can't test the whole population. It's impossible most of the time, if depending on the population, the size, right? But it helps us to sample first and then we go and test. Because we're gonna be comparing documents. We can't compare documents of 100 things, right? So just the logic of things, like follow that and those principles, and then easy marks to remember as well. These ones are mostly our general points or points that you always see in scenarios. Um, Make sure you never forget these ones because they are free marks, really. And then new sections learned, go read them. If you see there's a new section in companies that, like, sure, sometimes the scenario, the solution will explain it to you very well, and you might not need to go there, especially if it's something you've never seen or they said is not examinable. But sometimes it's a section that but you don't remember that thing. At least go back and refresh on it, right? And then does it follow the standard if applicable? Can use late. Yeah, this is like your bread and butter points, like your assistance with, you know, maybe let's say management expert or your estimates or um, what else can you use for the standard? Audit reporting. The standard is very useful there. Those type of things where you can just refer to the standard. CPC as well, like was there a section that applies here? Could I just, and does it follow it well? Because remember, in the exam, all you'll have is the section. So it's easier for you to know that, okay, I have this thing and I can just follow it to answer that same required, right? So yeah, all you're doing is just helping yourself in the future, essentially. And then does it follow IFRS as well, right? Usually for substantives here, like when they are testing inventory, you know, was it an IS2 thing that I could see in the standard? because once I get to the exam again, you will have the Phoenix standards most of the time. So then you will have something to help you out in another situation, even if it's IFRS 15, right? And understand why they did that thing, right? Understand why they linked it to that specific accession, for example. Because then in IFRS 15, you should be able to apply same type of like logic in a sense, right? But yeah, I guess that we're diving too deep now. And then read these notes before doing your next question. Okay, I meant to say question here. Before doing your next question, read these notes, right? And trust me, it builds up. Like you're just adding. The amount of principles you know by question 10, question 15 are going to be crazy, right? So, and all auditing topics are interconnected again. So don't worry about the topic. If your first topic was acceptance and continuance, the next one is CPC. Remember, acceptance and continuance has some CPC in it. So you're still learning. If the next one has Companies Act, everything in a way almost links to the Companies Act. If the next one has ISAs, ISAs can also lead to the CPC. So see all those things. So you're always learning. So don't worry too much. Just keep doing the questions and yeah, you should be fine. You should be fine. And then yeah, just to show you in an example, right? Before we wrap up, right? It's gonna be probably under an hour. Just to show you an example, this was an ITC paper, Jan 2024, as you guys can see here. Anyone in CTA, I would recommend, are taking this question. But it's a simple, okay, it's not, let me not say simple, but it's a CPC question, right? Or ethics question. So they say here again, like I said, right, you would read the required first, right? Come into your required, and you see here, I took out required E, but you would have the whole question. So you would have assessed what's your strong point, what's your weak point, right? If you see that, okay, ethical threats, okay, ethics and CPC type of things, I'm good. This is probably gonna be your starting point, whatever the case is, right? But if not, then you would have started there, right? But so here in this, I just took this one out for the example. So they say discuss with reference to the information provided in section 1 and 2, right? So sections 1 and 2. So you see already, okay, they're directing me, right? And I put it down here. Um, section 1 and 2 only, right? In a way, because like um just save yourself time. You don't want to read the whole question just for one required. Doesn't make sense, right? Sections 1 and 2. So okay, that's where I'm focusing. Number 2, and then when you move on, they say any ethical threats and concerns. You see, ethical threats and concerns looks broad. Like they didn't say CPC specifically, right? So in your head, you are thinking this when you see a required, right? And you're thinking, okay, it says ethical threats and concerns, so I could talk about anything that's ethically related, right? So it could be CPC, could be, I mean, King 4, as you guys know, King 4 is ethics for the company, right? King 4 is ethics for the company. So um maybe it could apply. You're just thinking now, right? And then maybe, any other, okay, ethical, I don't think your ethical theories can apply here because it's like ethical threats and concerns. It almost sounds like CPC. So you in your head, you think, okay, it's probably going to be more CPC here. But then they say you may have regarding the behavior and actions of Michaela. Michaela is our golden ticket. So as and when we go dive back into the scenario, we're just looking at Michaela and the things she is doing, right? Think about how powerful that is because whenever you're reading the scenario, you're just looking for Michaela and what is Michaela doing? That's all you are doing in answering this question, right? And then you just consider, okay, with the 5 principles I know, what did she affect? In each action she does, okay, she affected, maybe lied, she lied, okay, integrity, maybe she did this, okay, it's gonna be this, gonna be this, gonna be this, right? So yeah, you're just saving yourself time. And then they say, do not discuss the significance of any threat and do not provide any safeguards, right? So yeah, just a small, crash course here. You guys know these two things go together because as you know, right, you cannot have safeguards if you haven't evaluated the threat or the significance of the threat. So it makes sense that they go together. But again, so basically telling you, okay, just identify the threats to us and explain them and then leave it there. You don't have to tell us about, whether this person is a senior and the size of that thing. And you don't have to tell us what can we do to fix that problem, right? Okay, then and then of course you'll be highlighting here sections 1 and 2 so that you don't miss section 2. Don't miss section 2 because that would be, you cutting your marks in half most of the time. And then okay, it's ethical threats and concerns, and then it's Michaela. This one is a big one. I would even circle it because Michaela is gonna be our golden ticket, right? And then yeah, also here, of course. But this is common really. And then so you see the key points here, we're looking at Michaela, ethical threats. So it's anything that she hasn't done that thing most of the time, but it's also concerns, right? So it could be threats which has not happened, and it could be concerns which could be something that has already happened. So yeah. And then section 1 and 2 only. And then there's a broad scope, CPC, ethics, King 4. So that's all you are thinking, right? And already you have a plethora of things you can look at to answer this question. But okay, of course I don't think I'm gonna read the whole thing. But just looking at this, right, already okay, you are expecting Michaela to be a CSA because it's a CPC question. So you'll be reading, okay, dental, there's a panel beating business by 32-year-old Michaela and Marcelo. They are only directors of the company, right? Okay, okay, you're thinking, okay, that might be the issue as well because why are they the only directors? Um, and then Michaela Panelli is a CSA. Again, our golden ticket and possibly always our first point, actually. But we need to know what she is doing so that we answer that first sentence. And then I say full-time audit manager at a large audit firm named Confidence Assurance. Marcelo is a qualified day-to-day operations dentals on a full-time basis, right? So just looking at her, you'd be thinking she's an auditor only. But like I always say with CPC questions, try to read the whole thing. Because later it comes out that she also works for Dent Out, I think. Somewhere here. Okay, I don't want to go through this because it's gonna take you guys time. But yeah, just the approach of it, right? So you'll be looking at Michaela, everything that affects Michaela, and everything that she does, her behavior, right? And per behavior, all you'll be doing is, and I like this question because it integrates everything. So there could be a place where Michaela is not adhering to an EFRAS here, right? And you'll be thinking, okay, EFRAS not adhering to EFRAS, you are breaching Companies Act, right? Because Companies Act says EFRAS must be applied in this way, right? So you're breaching Companies Act, therefore she's breaching professional behavior, right? Those type of things. And in her audit duties, if she is doing something that ISAs do not want, then she's also preaching professional competence in UK because she's not following standards. You see, so that integration and everything, but it will be just you following Michaela and whatever she does. This was a long thing, and I probably should have taken a shorter thing to look at. But yeah, so that's your section 1 and your section 2. So your background and the second section, right? And I guess there are also King 4 considerations here. King 4 report. So whatever she does, it will be a matter of, okay, let's assess Michaela in terms of that action. So when it comes to this, you thinking, okay, how am I going to approach this? You'll be thinking in terms of one action Michaela does. First, you would group them up. Like let's say, like here, she's doing something in relation to the financial statements. That would probably be your heading, right? Because it relates to financial statements. And then maybe she does something in relation to a specific meeting, which is separate to the financial statements. That would be another heading of yours, right? So already you are grouping things and you're thinking, okay, this is how I'm gonna attack this thing. And it just alleviates you stressing too much, right? Um, but yeah, and then um, yeah, and then you just attack the question. I think most of us, have been doing CPC a lot, but at least you have key things to think about, right? And then when it comes to the marking, I guess, I mean, marking for CPC shouldn't be that hard, but you'll be just looking at this sentence is probably too long for me, but just looking at the principle, right? Looking at the principle of how they are applying that thing. Like Michaela is a professional accountant. Okay, so I need to mention that she is a professional accountant because she is a CSA. But okay, this one might not be important most of the time. But yeah, because she's a CSA, right? In brackets. And then in public practice, because she's an audit manager as well. And in business, director and shareholder of Dentout, right? So you see how in applying, they are picking things from the scenario, right? This is something you need to pay careful attention to. Don't just read to see if I'm wrong or right, right? Because I think we, as people, we are too attached to if we're wrong or right. But look at, even how they are writing a thing, because that might actually make you lose marks. Because you might be right, but the marker will give you wrong because you're not applying. You see, so that's why CPC really, like, that's where people struggle, if I'm being honest, right? So yeah, and then they say part one, two, three, four, because she's both an auditor and in business as well. Of the SICA Code of Professional Conduct, right? And then they grouped it into roles and responsibilities. And here essentially they talk about how she's a full-time employee of CAI who also executes duties for Dent Out, right? That one would probably would normally expect to be done on a full-time basis. So here they're saying that she's works for CAI, which is an audit firm, and also works for Dent Out, right? So that I would call this conflict of interest most of the time, or I would call it, yeah, conflict of interest, right? Because she's doing two things at the same time, right? And then the aforementioned matter creates self-interest threat to professional competence and true care, right? And then they applied it here. Um, but yeah, she may not be able to perform duties. And then here, this is you explaining why. Why is this an issue, right? Sure, you're saying this, but like the issue is that she's not gonna do it with necessary diligence and dedication, right? Which is a word that comes exactly from, okay, not exactly, but it comes from the standard itself. You see, so all of these things are you just applying the principle, and then also in preparation of financial statements again, she did not adhere to IFRS 16, right? Which they connect to the Companies Act here, right? I cut it short here, but they also link that to professional behavior because when breaching Companies Act, you're breaching professional behavior. But yeah, I didn't wanna do like the whole question per se, but yeah, I just wanted to. I think the tips alone are very useful. Like if you guys try to implement these things, um, I can bet, I can bet money on this. Like you're going to improve, right? You're going to improve. Um, And yeah, guys, yeah. I hope I didn't miss anything here. And I hope this was very useful to you. I'm sure. Wait. Uh yeah. Yeah, like I was saying, guys, I hope it was very useful. And I know like it's probably hard, difficult. You're thinking, is this even possible? But just try your best. Try your best and you know, aim to aim to show up all the time. Aim to, at least answer the full question, answer everything, and then at least you can relax. Um, okay, I see something in the chat, yeah. Or if anyone has any questions, you can also, pop those in the chat. So Zayn is saying, I'm a second year BXI. Appreciate it because it helped me as well. Thanks for all the tips. Yeah, guys, I think, you know, um, I would say definitely, and I'm sure you guys have seen some of the things I mentioned here. They probably do up. You probably have been doing them, right? And that's the reason why they work. And if you stop doing them, you'll see the opposite of it. Then you find that, oh, okay, that's why I was losing marks, right? So, um, yeah, all you have to do is just keep adding the good stuff, and yeah, try to improve. And I wish you guys good luck. Your next test. Um, bring your best in there, and as always, stay calm and aim to finish. And yeah, I guess I'll see you guys in my next session.